So here is kind of a broad outline. Chapter 1, the things which John had seen. Chapters 2 and 3, the things which are the letters to the 7 churches. The things that will take place after this, chapters 4 through 22. And please notice this great big section right here at 3:6. Now we went too far. We love that technology. If you don't believe in the devil, you haven't worked with technology. There we go. One more. The Lamb breaks the 7th seal. And notice that entire section is from chapter 8 through chapter 18. This is the 7th seal, which brings us the 7 trumpets, which brings us the 7 bowls and the great intensity of the wrath of God. And then, of course, we have the epilogue of the letter, where Jesus promises that he is coming, a final charge of expectation and obedience, and a final warning not to alter the book of Revelation. Now, the 4th principle, and this is the one we'll spend our time on, shows an exegetical correlation between the 70th week of Daniel 9:27, the synoptics, and Revelation 4 through 19. The 4th principle for understanding the structure of Revelation is this correlation between Daniel's 70th week of 9:27 with Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, and Revelation 4 to 19. Just for review, Daniel 9:24 says, 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So you're to know and to discern from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince. There will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then, after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. The people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war. Desolations are determined. And he will make a covenant, a firm covenant, or affirm a covenant. It could be a covenant that is in existence but not working. And so the Antichrist comes along and affirms it or confirms it. With the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to the sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abomination will come one who makes desolate, even upon until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Daniel records 3 distinct time units of 7 weeks, 62 weeks and 1 week. Now, the question that Bible expositors face is, do you take these numbers symbolically or literally? You will find that most of your non-rapturous, non-dispensationalists, and post and mids, they like to take it as symbolic because, believe me, not the devil is in the detail, but the divine truth is in the detail. And you have to wrestle with the detail, and if you don't, well, then you can skirt things away. The symbolic argument. Some commentators take the 70 weeks as symbolic with no definite time period. For instance, Vernon Poythress says, it is an Old Testament symbolic pattern which should not be understood as years or days. There is no grammatical or historical evidence for understanding that the weeks are weeks of years. These are very broad statements which cannot be supported, I believe, by good scholarship. McComsky argues that the numbers are symbolic since an exact chronological order cannot be established. Well, I suggest that McComsky read Harold Honer's book on Herod Antipas and the tremendous work that he's done on the 70 weeks of Daniel and showing the fulfillment to the very day that Jesus entered Jerusalem and offered to shepherd the kingdom. What are the arguments for a literal understanding of these? Well, Leon Wood says, definite numbers are used to divide the 70 weeks into 3 units. The symbolic view makes it difficult to understand the definite numbers as applied to the division of the 70 weeks. In other words, why do you have 3 definite divisions, but they're symbolic periods? It is better to understand the 70 weeks as literal with definite time periods. The prayer of Daniel. This prophecy is an answer to Daniel's prayer. And of course, it is based on his understanding of the 70 years of captivity in Jeremiah 25 and 29, which are 70 literal numbers. Israel had violated the sabbatical rest for 490 years. And so Israel was going to go into judgment for 490 years. Not symbolic numbers, literal numbers. I mean, that's why Daniel got so excited in his prayer and confession, because he realized, he knew when he went into captivity, he realized that the days of their captivity was coming to an end, and that they were going to be allowed to go back into the land, that God was a God of literal numbers. And so he confesses the sins of the nation in so many different ways to prepare the nation to return to the land. Linguistic distinctions in Daniel. Daniel differentiates when he is referring to weeks of days rather than weeks of years in Daniel 10. He uses another expression which when he intends a definite period of days, indicated when he says evening and mornings. There is no indication in Daniel 9:24 through 27 that he is referring to weeks of days, so a logical implication is that weeks of years are referred to in the context. 7-year units. A unit of 7 years harmonizes well with Daniel 7 and Daniel 12. Daniel talks about times, and half a time, 3.5 years. The 70th week of Daniel is divided into 2 3.5-year periods. Since the 70th week is a unit of 7 years, then the other 69 weeks should also be units of 7 years. And of course, there is a separate Hebrew term for periods, which is represented as a year in Daniel 4. And so we see that there is a 3-unit structure in Daniel 9:27. Unit 1 is to be understood as 7 weeks or 49 years for the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Unit 2 is 69 weeks or 434 years until the Messiah Prince would come, which was we call it the triumphal entry, but unfortunately it was a tragic entry, for people did not embrace him by faith. The first 2 units are already fulfilled, but remember that Jesus spoke of the 3rd unit as yet being in the future. And so in the 3rd unit of the 70th week of Daniel 9:27, we see it begins with a coming prince who will make a covenant with Israel. In the middle of it, there is an abomination of desolation and a breaking of the covenant. And at the end, God destroys the desolator. Now, this framework is important because it becomes a template to overlay on the synoptic gospels as well as the book of Revelation. Daniel 9:27 with the synoptic gospels, in particular Matthew 23:15 and Mark 13:4. This demonstrates that the 3rd unit of 7 years was yet to be fulfilled after the life of Jesus on earth. Jesus was answering 3 questions. You will remember that the disciples asked him as they had sat on the Mount of Olives overlooking the Temple Mount, about 125 feet above, a little kind of a peering view over it all. They said, "Tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Now, the response to these questions, Jesus laid out a sequence of events that helps the reader to understand. To understand when the final destruction of Jerusalem would take place, what prophetic events would lead up to his second coming, and then what would be the signs of the end of the age. Now, when we look at the synoptic gospels, the major synoptic structural marker for which Jesus gave his disciples that, you know what, when this happens, now you know that the end is coming. Matthew's reference to the abomination of desolation in Matthew 24:15. Jesus said many signs will be the beginning of birth pangs, leading to the end of the age, also known as the Great Tribulation. But the abomination of desolation is the major sign that you folks in that tribulation period are to look out for it is the major marker of the midpoint of the 70th